Hello and welcome to today's grand incident. It's Halloween, which means I am now required to make something related to the month of spooks. Despite what I've said in the past about Touhou fangame diversity, the horror genre is not one that's commonly explored. Admittedly, I might be wrong about that, as I haven't looked very hard due to my large dislike of cheap jump scares. The type of horror I like is atmospheric, the kind that never lets you feel truly comfortable, but keeps you interested and willing to continue playing with its design and storytelling. As it happens, there is at least one Touhou fangame that fits the style I just mentioned, and a single look at the art direction should be all you need to be convinced. That's what I wanted to talk about today, the first Touhou fangame to dive into the surreal horror experience, the game known as Third Eye. The game was released on September 30th, 2019 by a collaboration of different groups under the name Third Eye Project, and is a 2D horror exploration type of game starring Komeiji Koishi as the protagonist. Before I go any further, there are a few things I should mention. First is that Third Eye contains mature subject matter and visuals that some might find disturbing, so viewer discretion is advised. Second is that while it is a game, the story is 99% of the draw, so I won't be going into too much detail on it. The reason I'm bringing this up now is because I will be talking about the ending. I'll include a timestamp to skip that if you want to avoid it. With all that said, let's begin. The game starts out with Koishi waking up in what appears to be her room. Before you can do anything, you'll have to pick up her hat, which functions as the inventory. From here you'll gain access to your buttons, which I'll be referring to by their keys. Z key will interact with objects and characters when the white arrow appears above them. Aside from just checking things, there are papers scattered throughout the game that you can collect. The majority of these are related to psychology, and while not required, are an interesting extra to keep an eye out for. The C key will open the inventory. Here you can check which papers you found and use items. Key items are used automatically, so the only thing you can really do in here is use eye drops. This brings us to the namesake mechanic. Pressing the X key will activate Koishi's third eye. The third eye changes your perception of many different things. It's not a stretch to call it nightmare vision. While it's active, interacting with things offers different dialogue, and there are papers that can only be seen and picked up like this. It's also just worth taking a look at the environments under its gaze, so activating it everywhere is a fine idea. Using the third eye too much will strain it though, so you need to use the eye drops to refresh it, should it go bloodshot. The thing is, excessive use of it doesn't really do anything, it just takes you back to the title screen. It's worth mentioning that aside from closing the game, this is the only way to go back. Kinda strange, but there isn't much to do on the menu anyways. Well, actually, if you wait long enough, the game starts to play a really weird movie, but you'll have to see that one for yourself. The game constantly autosaves, so you'll load up directly in the room you dried your eye out in. The only difference is a doll of Koishi will be there to insult you for your decision. This doll has a paper to collect, so if you want all of them, you'll have to suffer the shame. The last key is the V key, and is used to fast travel. It only works if an arrow indicates you can go that direction, but not every room has one, so it's a bit unreliable. Now that I've covered the controls, let's get into the world. The first place Koishi ends up is a park. The goal in this area isn't laid out. You have to go in and figure it out yourself. Progress is made by interacting with the different characters and finding items to use until you reach the end. This seems pretty simple in theory, but there are times when everything comes to a halt because you have no idea what you need. Certain items also won't be picked up until you've talked to the right person, but this rule isn't consistent among them. A good example here is the not-so-happy mask saleswoman. She'll tell Koishi that you can buy a mask for 5,000. So how do you get the mask? Back near the beginning, there's a snake behind a tree that Koishi doesn't care about, at least until that conversation happens. You can then pick up the snake and trade it for a mask instead. Each area isn't that large, so you'd think it wouldn't take that long to brute force every option. But the main issue here is how long the gaps between progress can end up being due to some of these more confusing solutions. Back to the park. Halfway in, you'll encounter a trio of girls that Koishi wants to play with. From here, you'll get your first real choice of the game. These determine your ending, so I won't tell you what does what until then. Just know that each area in the game has a choice to be made. From here, your objective is to befriend the girls to learn about their secret base. That's all I'm going to say about this area. Just remember that if you get lost, try talking to everything. After you finish the park, Koishi will wake up in her room again and complain that it's cold. Heading to the end of the hall will show the window snowed through, and Koishi can use it to climb outside. The climb is one way, so before you check it, there is a paper buried within that's very easy to miss. This is the only note that's hidden this well. Everything else you should be able to find yourself. Right away you run into the girl in blue, who seems to be trapped in a snowball. Koishi, helps her out, but the girl gets mad, and says she was trying to become a snowman. She then demands Koishi help make a snowman with her, having you gather the materials and such. While you're out doing that, you'll run into the girl in red, decorating a tree. Koishi asks for help, which causes a conflict. Seems that the two girls had a falling out and don't want to work together. It's up to you how you want to approach this. In other words, decision time. After that, it's just collecting what you need for the snowman. This area is easier to get through than the last, due to its focus on material gathering rather than trade quests. Even though there are only 2 characters here to talk to, the environment tells quite a story without them. It's easily my favorite area in the game for this reason. The area concludes when the snowman is built, but I'm not going to show you that. It's something you really should experience for yourself. The next area is quite different. It starts with Koichi waking up in a normal bedroom before having a lovely conversation with her older sister, Satori. Koichi will end up in a bamboo forest, where she runs into a girl who introduces herself as Mulberry Hearn. The name is a can of worms I don't want to get into, so I'm going to chalk this one up to a translation issue, and refer to her by the name I know her as, which is Maribel. Koichi finds Maribel suffering after getting a drop of liquid in her eye. From there, the two go together in search of Maribel's friend. This area doesn't let you use your third eye, and your inventory is blank, so there's no papers to collect here. Instead, there's a unique gimmick, a tape recorder that you can use to play tapes. There are a few tapes scattered throughout the area that play a couple seconds of audio. This is a neat idea, but it has some issues. The tapes are short and replace the audio when used, but if you move to the next screen, the muted audio comes back, causing an overlap. The other issue is related to how this area works. Progress is made simply by interacting with everything to see all the events. In order to find Maribel's friend and move on, you have to find and play her favorite tape. The problem is that it won't work until you've done everything else. This isn't an issue if finding the tape is the last thing you do, but if you try before that, then you might get stuck for a while. Maribel's friend is the girl Renko. They meet back up, and before moving on, Maribel asks Koichi to find a blank tape. Same deal as last time, you just need to experience everything, then bring the tape back. The decision here is a bit weird as well, and it's the last thing that happened in the area. You'll have to find a special spot in a big looping area for the girls. They give hints, but they're a bit worthless. Thing is, when you check a spot, you get the option to go with it or keep looking. But the correct spot doesn't do that, it will just advance the game. Once that's all taken care of, Koichi will have to wander a bit before starting the next area. Koichi will wake up in the familiar bedroom, and this time the whole house is intact. This area is a lot of running around, and is mostly about interacting with characters, specifically the animals. The third eye is required to communicate with them, and each one will give you a paper. This area doesn't play well with the fast travel ability, as there tends to be multiple pathways in the same direction. Going to the top floor, you'll find a bird girl in a cage, who tells Koichi that she wants to be let out, and also that she wants something shiny. It isn't really a trade quest like the first area, but there are a lot of characters to talk to move the game along. This area highlights another weakness of this game, which you might have already noticed. Dialogue in this game scrolls at a set speed, and there's no way to change it. Normally you'd expect the button to fill the window and let you read at your own pace, but here all it does is advance the next part of the conversation. This isn't so bad when it's tied to the story, but here it's required to advance, so you have to sit through a lot of fluff should you get lost. This decision is right at the end like the last area. After you make your choice, the game will advance you to the final area. The last area is short and straightforward with some fun surprises. Of course I'm not going to show any of it to you. Instead I'm going right to the end. In other words, the endings. I've left a timestamp on screen to skip them if you're interested in trying the game yourself and don't want to be spoiled. With that said, let's get into it. Third Eye has 3 endings to find, and are linked to the decisions you make throughout the game. There are important parts in the story I didn't cover that help you better understand what's going on, so some of what is said here won't make much sense. When you reach the end of the final area, you'll come to one last choice, but the outcome for this one is already set, so it's only an illusion of choice. First is the bad ending. This ending is always obtained if you make a single bad decision throughout the game. Koichi will choose to write off the past and head back indoors. From there, a bunch of things from the previous area will appear all over. Walk around until the game fades out to reveal Koichi asleep on the floor, being scolded by her sister. This ending is the most likely one you'll get on a first playthrough, since it only takes one mistake to lock yourself into it. Next is the good ending. This one is obtained by making the following decisions. Feel what they feel. Let's work together. Finding the correct spot, and return the key. Koichi will choose to bury her past by letting it go, while declaring that she'll decide for herself. Once the credits roll, Satori will tell Koichi about what's been happening while she was asleep, and tells her she's happy Koichi understands how she feels, and is glad that she didn't give up on her. Koichi remarks on families, and vows to work on it. I call this one the good end, but it's more my opinion than fact, because the last ending is what I refer to as the true ending. To get the third ending, you need to pick the following choices. Just go home already. I'm gonna work by myself. Picking a wrong spot and telling the girls, and help your friend. When you reach the end, Koichi will choose to bury her past again, but this time violently, proclaiming that she'll do what she wants. After the credits, Koichi is seen forcibly closing her third eye to be free of it, then runs off laughing. The reason I refer to this as the true ending is due to who Koichi is in Touhou. Koishi Komeiji is a yokai known as a Satori. Satori have the ability to read minds using their third eye, making them one of the most hated species out there. Koishi couldn't handle the fear and hatred directed at her for her abilities, so she destroyed her own ability by closing her third eye. In doing so, she closed off her own mind, and became a being who can only act unconsciously. Koishi can only be seen by others when she wants to, and those who do see her forget their encounter as soon as she leaves. The only way to remember her is if you knew of her existence already. Should a day ever come where Koishi decides she doesn't want to be seen anymore, she'll disappear as silently as if she never existed to begin with. This of course isn't a one-to-one comparison for the events of this game, but it's the closest outcome to the source material. The decisions made to get the true ending are all selfish and avoidant, whereas the ones for the good ending are the opposite. Everything in between is Koishi not being able to make a choice, thus the bad ending. This is of course one of those games where a lot is up to your own interpretation, so this is only my opinion on the matter. As I mentioned, there's a good amount within the game that I've intentionally left out, so if you decided to watch this part about the endings and are interested but aren't fully satisfied, I would definitely recommend checking it out yourself. Third Eye is quite the experience of a game. The art is done by the artist Koto Inari, who is well known for their unique style. I spent a while trying to find the right words to describe it, but I don't know how. It really is something you have to see to believe. I'll of course be leaving a link to their stuff in the description, and I highly recommend you check it out. Aside from the visuals, the music is fantastic and goes well with the atmosphere. My personal favorite is the menu theme, mostly because I'm a sucker for good piano. The idea behind the third eye mechanic is really cool, and I love that everything you examine in the game is done so from Koishi's perspective, even the stuff in the inventory that you don't need to check at all. Unfortunately, I have some problems with a few aspects. I already mentioned the halting progression and dialogue speed, so I don't need to get into those again. This first one is a problem that might not even exist in Japanese. What I mean, of course, is that the issue lies in the translation. I don't know who did it, but the English translation has a number of grammatical problems. Some lines were also flat out untranslated. In an older version, the last two decisions were not translated. This has been fixed, but one of the lines in the endings is still like this. A couple of errors isn't that much of a problem itself. It's more so that with so many there, it makes me wonder how much of the context or sentence structure just isn't conveying what it's intended to. Some conversations make zero sense, and while that does happen in these types of games intentionally, it's hard to say for sure for this one. There's also times where the dialogue box sticks itself off screen, and the words just cut out. The next few complaints I have are pretty minor, but I'll explain afterwards why I consider them important enough to mention. The third eye is a cool mechanic, but its area of effect is weird. You can angle the view by holding the button and moving, but it doesn't stop you from moving, making it really awkward to aim it. I also found an issue when trying to interact with different things. Sometimes Koishi would just flip out, and not target the right arrow. The biggest one of these is the collision detection. Koishi can sometimes just walk inside of background pieces. This is especially obvious on the trees in the Koishi doll. It looks really goofy. You can play through the game and overlook all of these and it would be fine, so here's why I mention them. It's human nature to use humor to cope with things we find uncomfortable or hard to deal with. In a game like Third Eye, a proper atmosphere is desired throughout the whole experience to leave a bigger impact on you with its story, as horror games tend to push you out of your comfort zone. If you saw something within the game that had an impact on you, odds are you would try to find a way to handle it, and if you could poke fun at the game that caused it, you could soften the blow better than just picking something unrelated to laugh at. In Third Eye's case, that something is the nitpicks I mentioned. Remembering that I can walk into a tree no problem can take you out of the immersion. I thought of an example to better illustrate the point I'm trying to make. Let's say someone tells you a ghost story that sends a chill up your spine. The only thing is, the guy who told you it wasn't wearing any pants. Stupid, right? Now imagine the same story, but nothing out of the ordinary about the way they're dressed. In which scenario would you find yourself less likely to cope with your fear? For me, being able to associate something that scared me with something funny directly related to what made me afraid in the first place helps. I really hope this makes sense. I am far from a psychologist. I'm just trying to find a way to explain why I think it's so important for a horror game to iron out the little things within it. For the purpose of this video, I played through the whole game again, only this time I remembered enough not to have my progress halted, and accepted all the minor issues for what they were without paying attention to them. I ended up enjoying the game much more on this second run. Point here is, you can get a lot out of the game if you don't worry about these issues, but that's a tall order for someone's first ever play of it, and you'd want someone to want to play through the game again because they want to understand it better. Not because they didn't understand it at all. Regarding the group, Third Eye Project, I don't really know what's going on with them. There is a website that was made in 2017 that has received very little in the way of updates, at least for the English version. The Japanese version has a downloadable demo and the soundtrack available for purchase. English just says coming soon. I'll leave a link to it down below, but there really isn't a lot there. The most recent thing I can find is that the game is planned to release on Nintendo Switch and PS4, but this is likely only going to happen within Japan. It's a shame since there's a lot about this game to enjoy, and a version for these systems would be a good excuse to brush up on the smaller aspects in translation. Maybe I'm wrong, and it will be an international release, but I'm not holding my breath. With all that said, time for the rating. Third Eye is just barely a rank Aya of a game. Let me explain why. The biggest reason for this is the main character. Koichi is the most important character in the game to know about, as her backstory adds to the overall story and endings. Characters related to her are also important, but not as much. A lot of the Touhou elements in the game are references. There is character theming to locations, even if who those characters are isn't always relevant to the plot within the area. While these extras don't have any direct impact on Koichi's story, they are all pretty accurate to their personalities. I appreciate that even with how different the ideas in this game are from usual Touhou fan games, it still handles all the characters it uses properly and accurately. Would you agree or disagree? Let me know what you think. Third Eye was a first in Touhou fan games to tackle this genre, and I think it did a pretty good job. It has a few faults for sure, but looking past those lets you enjoy a very strange experience. I hope that the group behind this finds the inspiration to make another, as I really love the idea and art style behind the first one. I may not have a third eye myself, but I will definitely keep the other two peeled for any info on a potential sequel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you during the next incident.